You know, I got to be honest with you here, boss. You don't want to give me that gun. 'Cause I'd probably shoot you with it.
Do you suffer from fear of losing your election? Are you terrified that voters will discover you've done nothing to improve their lives? Maybe it's time you talk to your spin doctor about Incarcerex. In clinical trials, Incarcerex has been shown effective at reducing election-related anxieties by making voters think you're doing something about the drug problem. It's simplistic and fast-acting. If your problems continue or get worse, you can always double or triple your dose of Incarcerex. Whether it's addiction, therapeutic use, or just casual use, there's an Incarcerex plan for every American. Best of all, taxpayers, not you, will foot the bill. So talk to your spin doctor about Incarcerex today. Common side effects include loss of civil liberties, police corruption, racial injustice, increased terrorism, spread of HIV and AIDS, and violent crime. Bloated prisons are also a common side effect. Stop taking Incarcerex if bloating lasts longer than 20 years. If you're trying to balance the budget, keep families together, or protect human rights, Incarcerex may not be right for you. Do not mix Incarcerex with the Constitution or common sense. So start taking Incarcerex and keep pretending you're doing something about the drug problem.
The prison industrial complex is a system situated at the intersection of government and private interests. It uses prisons as a solution to social, political, and economic problems. It includes human rights violations, the death penalty, slave labor, policing, courts, the media, political prisoners, and the elimination of dissent.
They have found a new way to make money, of poor, black, and brown people. Right? So they take away the steel mills, take away the major industries, and then they create prisons. The bodies have become commodities in the system. Okay? So now my number, 778-4283, you can basically say that's a barcode. You know what I mean? And that cell is like, you know, they trying to figure out, well, how much shelf life will I have for this particular product, this particular commodity in this particular cell, so how much money I can make from this individual. All right? So now we're counting heads as if they're cans on a shelf, you know, in this industry, this prison industrial complex. And then, so if you have an industry that feeds off people's lives, you have to figure out some kind of way to make sure that the industry continues to expand and grow. And how do they do that? They change the laws to make the laws much more repressive so that more people go to prisons for less violations of the law and stay in prison for longer periods of time.
I was raised believing that incarceration was expensive to the taxpayer. It was not in anyone's best interest to lock someone in a cage unless it was absolutely necessary. In the mid-1980s, a law was passed that allowed privately owned corporations to build and operate prisons.
I'm a real advocate of private prisons, having privatized half the prisons in New Mexico. And the reason for doing that is the same goods, same services at a third less the price.
Have we reached a point of building so many prisons that the purveyors are now looking for ways to keep them all full?
Here's the way a private prison works, okay? You pay somebody to build a fancy cage. Then you fill it up as far as you can get it, which is pretty full. Full of people that, the people that built the cage get paid $40,000 or $50,000 a year to just keep in the cage.
You have corporations like Wackenhut, you know, they just changed their name, Corrections Corporation of America, that house prisoners, nonviolent drug offenders. As a matter of fact, I think 60% of the increase in prison population under Bill Clinton, which was like 1 million people, of the 60% of that new prison population are nonviolent drug offenders.
Now, if you've got 5,000 people in your cage and you're being paid $30,000, $40,000 a year for them, that's a lot of money. And if you can, on top of that, use them as your private property, as chattel property, that you can then make do work or produce things that you get paid for on top of that, what a great deal. Now, where I come from, when you transform a person into a piece of property, that's called slavery.
Not far from Bakersfield, California is a small town of Taft, once home to a thriving oil industry. But like so many oil towns across America, the oil finally dried up. Like many bankrupt towns, a private prison stepped in to save the day. The Taft Correctional Institution is owned by the GEO Group, formerly known as Wackenhut. Wackenhut changed its name after a storm of bad publicity.
The GEO Group is the leader in providing diversified services to government agencies around the globe. Our global expertise in outsourcing includes the design, construction, financing, management, and operation of jails, prisons, and special purpose institutions, and immigration and detention centers.
They trade their stock on Wall Street based upon the number of people that are in jail. If that isn't sick, if that isn't the best definition of sickness in a society, in a culture, in a civilization, I can't tell you what is.
We need to be clear and start promoting that what we see with mass incarceration and what happened to the political prisons was part of a counterinsurgency program, a counterinsurgency strategy. Now, many of us are familiar with the counterintelligence program, which was just one aspect that particularly went after our political leadership and our organizers. That's where most of the political prisoners come from. But a general counterinsurgency program targets the whole of the people, and that's what we've experienced since the 1960s. And the mass incarceration piece, I think, as it unfolded, it turned out to be, on their part, a very brilliant strategy of containing mass struggle by just locking up millions of our people or in setting conditions basically that are tantamount to slavery. So when we look at that, we need to look at it, I think, in a comprehensive sense, because I think sometimes it's these isolated ways of looking at it, even though they may sound attractive, they may sound sexy, some of the things that are coming out of around, like the new Jim Crow, for instance, it sounds good. It makes a certain kind of sense within a particular framework. But when we look at it programmatically, it falls short in many respects. And we have to look at these things, I think, in their totality to understand that there was deliberate, systematic attack on us as a people, and the movement, the mass movement that we had in 1950s, 60s, and 70s, which posed some strategic challenges to this empire and continue to do so, even though it's much more dormant than it has been and needs to be.
I just met the most marvelous bunch of niggers. the most marvelous bunch of... You get them? Shh.